Hi there. Welcome to the Imperfect Prophet podcast for women who wonder. Frankly, as we go through life, I'm sure we wonder about a great deal. First as little kids, then as adolescents, then as young women, then as transitional women. What are we calling ourselves these days? And then you get to this point in life, or my point in life, when you're postmenopausal and wondering what's next. Wondering if the parade already passed you by. Join me, Wonder Wendy. I'm going to be your host as we talk about some of these unique challenges that face women today in a new millennium, going through menopause and trying to live a rich, full life. There might even be a few men and younger women that want to listen in too. That's okay. But there's a roller coaster and we're all on it. And I'm going to be your guide to help you figure out when you should close your eyes, when you should hang on, and maybe we'll explore some ideas for what works for you if it doesn't work for me, or vice versa. So join the conversation, pick up your favorite beverage, and we'll talk to you soon. Welcome to the Imperfect Prophet.
Hey there. I hope you're ready for another episode. I am sitting here with my tea, being quite cozy and comfy in the air conditioning. Thank goodness for it. And as always, I have a little story to start things out with. Here we are in the midst of the baseball season. So I'm inspired once again at the baseball park, but this time as I was actually leaving the game. And I spotted three guys. We just left the parking lot. They're walking down the sidewalk. Three young men. And at first glance, they looked exactly like 100 of other guys that were leaving the baseball park. You know, they had sneakers, joggers, baseball caps, t-shirts. And if you'd asked me to describe them, I probably would have said three college-age bros. But then I noticed something. At first, it didn't register, but they had white strings hanging beneath their shirts. And then it clicked. I'd seen that look before in Fiddler on the Roof. Not with joggers, of course, but curiosity got the better of me. And so I pulled out my phone and I did a little research, like you do. And I learned that those little white fringes are called zitzit, starts with a T. And they are attached to what's called a talit katan. And that's kind of like a small poncho-like garment that is worn beneath the shirt. And then a minute later, I noticed the curls in front of their ears. And suddenly I wasn't just seeing three guys leaving a baseball game. I was seeing three young men carrying a tradition thousands of years old. And yet they wove it into an otherwise familiar outfit. And yet there were those visible threads of identity, history, faith. They were modern and ancient, street and sacred. Bros with faith? Yeah, it's a thing. Both at the same time. And yet they stood out, but they didn't. What I had to realize was nothing about them had changed because I'd become more observant. But suddenly I could see the threads that connected them to something much larger than themselves. So why do I want to talk about that? I want to talk about that because it's true of so many things in life. The world doesn't necessarily change, but we simply notice what was there all along. And I also was struck by the fact that they seem perfectly comfortable with who they were. Now, think about it. Most of us wear some sort of uniform. The bros wear their t-shirts and joggers. But maybe it's for your profession. That iconic brown outfit that I would show to you and you'd say, that guy's a UPS driver or woman is a UPS driver. How about that tailored suit with a pussy bow that seemed to be the unofficial uniform of professional women in the 1970s? There are so many different looks that I could show to you and you'd say, that person is, or that person does. Then there are the generational representations. Open any high school yearbook and you'll discover in that yearbook, there are probably only a handful of looks that define whatever era it was or is. My high school years were marked by feathered hair, soft collars and/or Oxfords, and a whole lot of Fair Isle sweaters, at least amongst the preps. And by college, I had traded those in for a look that I felt a little edgier, a little more like the person I was becoming. And the funny thing is, every single one of us is trying to solve this same problem, balancing the uniform, the generational expectations, the societal expectations. We want to belong and we want to be ourselves. And these two desires are often in direct tension with one another. Trying to fit in and quietly hoping there's still room to stand out because we don't want to be identical. Ew, that would be scary. How much of what we wear is about fitting in? And when maybe should it be about telling the truth? Remember, these two desires aren't enemies. They're both deeply human. And that tension that comes when we believe we have to sacrifice one for the other. And for years, I believed authenticity could only be achieved by standing apart. But that world, the real world, seemed to reward blending in. I thought I had to choose. Maybe I didn't. No, I know I didn't. Because think about it, maybe it's more like music. Two notes, beep, 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 can be played together to create dissonance, or they can create harmony. The notes themselves don't really change. It's the relationship between them that does. And watching those young men, I saw they weren't choosing between modern life and ancient tradition. Their chosen uniform held both. Sneakers and sit-sit, baseball caps and heritage, street and sacred. Neither diminished the other. Instead, they created a harmony that was uniquely their own. And it made me wonder, what would it look like if the different parts of my own life stopped competing with one another? What if my professional self, my adventurous self, my playful self, my thoughtful self, and my 60-year-old self all came together in the same outfit? Or maybe they don't have to come together all in the same outfit. Personal style isn't about deciding which version of yourself gets to come out today. It's more about letting some of them meet and finding the moment to let them sneak out and play. What would it look like if more of us dressed in a way that honored all the threads of our story? And that's what so many of us are searching for. I hear women say it all the time. There's nothing in the mall for me. I can't find anything that fits. Sometimes they mean size, and sometimes they mean style. And sometimes they mean something much deeper. They mean they can't find themselves. We look to the mannequins in the store for role models. And some people love the outfit displayed on that rigid plastic body. Others look at it and think, well, I could never pull that off. Well, maybe that's not the store for you. It doesn't matter. But I'm going to say, I always want you to go around and look at the back of that mannequin. You'll usually discover the stylist who dressed that mannequin has used clips, pins, and binder clamps to make everything fit perfectly. And how many of us are comparing ourselves to people who appear effortless? Because they have someone pulling everything together behind the scenes. That's not just something you need to think of when you're shopping. That's a life lesson. You look at the magazines, you look at the Instagram. Celebrities have stylists. Politicians have image consultants. Influencers have photographers, lighting, editing apps, and carefully curated feeds. Very little is as effortless as it appears. And the goal isn't to look like the mannequin or the Instagram. The goal should be to look like yourself. We are all searching for a visual language that tells the truth about who we are. Let me repeat that one again. We are all searching for a visual language that tells the truth about who we are. And if your internal voice is, I don't feel good about myself, it's time to change that voice and put out a different image. Love yourself. Now, I have no desire to dress like those three men, but, not because I don't like the way they dress, but our backgrounds, traditions, they're very different. Even without the sit and the curls, I'm not a college bro. That's not my look, right? Maybe I could pull off a jogger, but I wouldn't wear it with an oversized t-shirt. Certainly not my look. But I did find myself admiring their ability to weave together two aspects quite seamlessly. So much so that I barely even noticed it first. Now, we spend a lot of our lives asking, is that appropriate? For my age or my profession or my body type, the trend, whatever that means. Let's just break that down a lot. First, what should somebody my age wear? Well, it depends on what you do. Are you active? Are you sitting at a desk? Are you a professional? Are you doing phone sales? Historically, there were rules. Young women could wear their hair down and show their ankles. But after a certain age, that same look was considered scandalous. Now, we're going back over 100 years to find that rule. But every generation has had its unwritten dress codes. And then all of a sudden, the boomers really blew that up. I think Tina Turner wore short skirts and high heels right up until the end of her life. So those generational rules, you're a certain age and you shouldn't have long hair, or you're a certain age and you shouldn't wear short skirts, or you shouldn't wear pants, or your skirt should be all gone. All gone. Wear what works for you and find a way to make it work. What is professional? Well, a plumber or that delivery person or the salesperson or the realtor, they all have different wardrobe needs. So it's not as easy. The lines are blurrier. Every workplace has its own culture, and we're all trying to figure out how to show up in a way that feels both authentic and effective. Oh, that question of what is flattering. Maybe we're trying to spend too much energy trying to look like something we're not. Think about it. If you have a cat and you cover it with feathers, there isn't enough feathers to really make that cat look like a bird. The goal isn't camouflage. It's finding what is true for you. And that trendy question, we already talked about it. You walk through the mall and you notice all these different styles. Almost every single storefront tells a different story. There isn't one dominant trend anymore. No universal skirt length, no single cut of pants. Fashion has become less about following one look and more about finding your own. Here's one I hear a lot. Well, what won't make people stare? Okay, can we discuss the irony involved here? People notice confidence far more than they notice the clothing. So I recently met a very tall woman who always dressed impeccably because she knew when she walked into a room, heads were going to turn because she was probably one of the tallest people in the room, if not the tallest person in the room. So her clothing was perfection. So she knew people were turning and saying, look at that sharply dressed woman. She didn't worry about being labeled, everybody noticed me because I was tall. She made sure everyone noticed. They noticed her confidence and her style. Now, every assumption I could think of, and I'm sure there are more, we've broken down. And maybe they're not valid. Maybe they're just that, assumptions. And what if we asked a really different question, a better question? What parts of me deserve to be visible? That really tall woman can't hide in a crowd, so she's going to shine. How can you listen to that advice and shine no matter what you look like? And as I was thinking about all this, I reached out to my daughter, Becca. Now, she's a professional costume designer, and I really wondered what she would think about my observations. Now, if you've never thought about what a costume designer does, because a lot of us just take that for granted, here's the short version. They don't just choose clothes to put on actors. They read the script, they study the character, they have to understand the time and place. And then they ask one question: who is this person? And then they answer that question with fabric and clothing. Honestly, I think we could all use a costume designer to help us curate our wardrobes. And maybe that's all a stylist is. After all, a good stylist can help you find a truer expression of yourself. What my daughter told me was something I'd never heard before. One of her colleagues advised an actor to go out and buy a piece of clothing they're genuinely excited about after the show closes. Not because they need new clothes, but because they need to reclaim themselves. These actors have often spent weeks or even months living inside another character, and they need to intentionally rediscover their own identity. And I love that. Now, many of us aren't actors, but we all play roles. Employee, boss, mother, wife, empty nester, volunteer, leader, follower, patient, caregiver, divorcee, widow. And each one of those roles shapes us. And some become part of who we are, but others quietly outlive their usefulness. And maybe that's why so many women reach a certain age and suddenly stand in front of a closet full of clothes, thinking, none of this feels like me anymore. My daughter said one other thing that kind of stayed with me. Clothes and truth go in hand in hand. Let me try that one again. Clothes and truth go hand in hand. Both are flexible. You never know what you may discover, and you've got to stay open to that. But it's also okay to have a comfy pair of jeans that feel just right. I don't think she was talking about just clothes. I think she was talking about identity, about finding different versions of ourselves, our uniforms, and our off duty days. Because finding your personal style isn't a one time decision. In fact, if you haven't revisited it for a while, maybe it's time to listen to that voice and look for something new. Just like that actor coming out of a role. Find something that excites you and helps you find yourself again. After all, we aren't the same people we were 5 years ago, or 10, or 20. I do still have a few cherries in my closet that are from a few years ago. And some things are timeless, but other things, we outgrow them or we change. They don't fit our personalities, even though they might still fit our bodies. Why would we expect our closets to tell the same story of our change if they haven't changed? Personal styling is evolutionary. It should be evolving with you. It's an ongoing conversation between who you've been, who you are today, and who you are still becoming. Then I realized once again how much of my life I've spent trying to fit into other people's expectations. My first husband was a prep from Connecticut. His world revolved around a certain set of labels. There were yacht clubs and a style that seemed effortless to literally everyone around him. I liked it well enough. It was classic. But my skinny jeans, pleather jackets, and stray cat inspired penny loafers with white socks, well, those suddenly felt out of place. Remember, it was the 80s, so I was very MTV fashionable, but not prep. So I adapted. I bought the cardigans, the Bermuda shorts. I traded the white slouch socks for knee socks. Little by little, I became something that I thought belonged in his world. But also during that journey, I stopped dressing like me. The saddest part, I became so vanilla that he eventually told me I looked more like his mother than his wife. I had become exactly who I thought he wanted. And in the process, I quietly misplaced myself and the woman he had fallen in love with. Life does that over and over again. You know, you step into the corporate expectations and you think you're supposed to be a certain way and you lose yourself. Or the mom expectations. Hey, can I just say how jealous I am of the choices young women have today for maternity attire? I mean, we had something that looked roughly like a circus tent with loud prints and big bows. Ick. And then, in addition to those corporate expectations, there are professional expectations. Your skirt shouldn't be too short, too long, not too much cleavage, not too much. Well, that word too much comes up all too often. And we've already talked about all the age expectations. How about good taste? Okay, a little good taste. I'll say that can go a long way. But maybe that's why personal style feels so surprisingly vulnerable. Every time you choose something new, it may feel a little bit uncomfortable at first. You're not sure if you're going to be accepted. It's hard. You have to ask, is it really me? My daughter, Becca again, when she's shopping with me, she has a phrase when I pull out something interesting. She looks at me and says, Mom, do you want to be that person or visit that person? It's a good question. Because sometimes I just want to visit that person. I might wear that shirt once and then never again. Probably not a good spend. So, anyway, let's go back to those three young men because they weren't making a statement for me. We drove by and they were completely oblivious to our existence. They were simply dressed in a way that reflected the whole of who they are. Nothing hidden, nothing exaggerated, nothing apologized for. And maybe that's what personal style really is, not dressing to impress, not dressing to disappear. Dressing so the outside matches the inside you want to be. Whether we realize it or not, we all tell a story before we ever say a word. That's why costume designers matter so much in the theater. Before an actor speaks a single line, the audience forms an impression based on what that actor is wearing. And the same, like it or not, is true in real life. The question isn't whether your clothes tell a story, because they do. The question is it your story? Now, this week, I want you to open your closet with a different question. Instead of saying, what should I wear today? Say, what in here feels most like me? Maybe it's that jacket you fell in love with, the one that still has the tags on it because you've been waiting for the right occasion. Here's a little secret. Sometimes the occasion isn't what you're waiting for. It's permission. I want you to pull out that garment that is waiting. Pair it with favorite jeans or just a simple black top. And let that one piece tell its story. How about that lipstick in a color that felt exciting at the makeup counter and you brought it home, but every time you put it on in the mirror, you go, ugh, that's not right. Take it back to the makeup counter and ask them to show you how to wear it. Sometimes it's just a matter of finding the right way to pair it with a different blush. You need to experiment. You need to play. Play is how we find ourselves. And honestly, this isn't really about clothes. It's about curiosity. Wear it just once, not to get attention, to tell yourself the truth. And one more thing, wear it with confidence. Stand up straight. Confidence is the best tailoring you'll ever own. And if you spend time looking for someone who doesn't like it once you walk out the door, you will probably find them. But if you spend the day enjoying the fact that it feels like you'll discover something much more important. The opinion that mattered most was your own. So maybe we need to stop choosing between who we are and the world we live in. Be like those 3 young men. Carry both. And that's the invitation for all of us. Stop asking, what should someone my age wear? And start asking, what would it look like if the outside finally reflected the person I'm becoming, I am become, I'm going to become, I want to become? Any one of the above. Because a wonderful bucket list life has never been about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more fully yourself. People rarely remember what you wore. They remember how you wore it. They remember confidence. They remember authenticity. They remember someone who looked completely comfortable being themselves. And maybe every stage of life deserves its own wardrobe. Not because fashion changes. That changes all the time. But because we change. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. But we do change. And it's okay. So until we talk again, keep wondering. And don't be afraid to let the outside finally catch up with the inside.
Like what you heard here today? Then we should be friends. I suggest you join my Facebook group. It's a good way to connect. We can have a conversation. Ask me questions, whatever you want to do. It is called the Wonderful Bucket List Life. That's Wonder-Full Bucket List Life. Be a bucket lister and join me on this adventure. Or you can go to my webpage, which is Wonder Wendy and Friends. Join the mailing list, learn about the book I wrote, adventures that are coming up in the future, and other podcasts. I look forward to talking to you soon, and stay hydrated. Have a great day.